welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today to be talking with two authors. We love having authors on the podcast. And we're talking with Tracie Peterson and Kimberley Woodhouse. Their new book, The Heart's Choice, is coming out this week. And thank you to both of you so much for coming on the podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So what we like to do with new guests is we like to learn a little bit about what inspired you to begin your path and to become an author. And so what about you, Tracie, and then Kimberley? What inspired you to get into writing?
I've always had a great passion for writing. I credit my mom with stirring up the storyteller in me. She used to give me a piece of paper and a pencil out of desperation to keep me quiet in church and tell me to write her a story. And afterwards, then she'd take me aside and say, tell me your story. And so I got undivided attention that way. And so writing and story became really important to me. I followed that through school. I loved writing essays, and all that were my favorite thing to do. Hate English, but love writing. And so, for me, I've always had my hand in somehow either writing poems or writing short stories or writing books or whatever. When I got in high school, I applied for creative writing because it was just such a passion, but I got rejected because the teacher said I didn't show enough creativity or imagination.
Oh, no.
Now, after 130 books, I figure I've proven her wrong.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the way that, for me, I've just always loved it.
What about you, Kimberley?
I have always loved story. So I was always a huge avid reader, but I'm a musician. And so my entire life growing up was all music and competition and lessons and, constantly working on all of that. But story was a huge part of my life. And it was in college. And I was a music major in college, and it was my English professor. And he said, man, you have a gift for story. He goes, you're a storyteller. And I thought, oh, that's cool. You kind of take it as a compliment, not really knowing what God was going to do with it. And then I got married and had our son, and he was really sick as a baby. He had issues with breathing. And I was up one night with him all night and started writing in the middle of the night because all the creative stuff, is just always flowing. And so I was writing stories, not thinking I'd ever do anything with it. And a friend of mine found them one time when we were moving. And she said, you're going to do something with this or I'm going to kill you. And so I did.
That's funny. I guess moving proves to be prophetic for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tracie, how did you get that first book? You had said you have 130 books. How did you get the first one? I'm always curious about that.
The very first book, back in the day, you used to write to publishing houses and ask for their guidelines. And so that's how you got started to try to get your foot in the door with any kind of publishing. And so I had sent out a lot of letters with the request for guidelines. And in those letters, we were taught, let them know what you're writing. Let them know if you have any finished manuscripts, that kind of thing. So I sent a letter for guidelines to Barber Publishing. And I did that because I had seen a few books that they had put out that were Christian romance. And that's what I wanted to write, was Christian historical romance. And I wrote them this letter, and I get a call from the editor. And he says, I see here that you write Christian historical fiction, romance. And he says, we're putting together a book club doing 2 contemporary books a month. And I'm just thrilled to pieces. I get so excited. And he says, would you by any chance have anything contemporary? And I was like, no, I don't want to write contemporary. And, he spent the next 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, convincing me to send him something, which just still to this day blows my mind. Why didn't I just say, of course I'll send you something. Of course I write contemporary. But I did that. I put something together immediately and sent it in. And I reminded him, though, I have a complete historical romance, Christian romance, already written, ready to go. And so he called me back and he said, I really like your writing style. Why don't you send me that historical that you have ready to go. And so I did. He also ended up contracting the contemporary that I sent in. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. But that came after years and years of rejections. That came after getting pretty discouraged and thinking it would never happen. After, thinking, well, I must have this wrong, because I really felt like God was guiding me to that, but it just wasn't coming together. So I was trying to figure out what it was I was supposed to be doing. And lo and behold, this call took place in November of 1992, and my first book was published in February 1993.
Gosh, when you got that call, you must have just hung up the phone and then just freaked out.
I did. I just screamed.
I bet. So, Kimberly, why don't you tell us a little bit, how did you two end up deciding to write together? Because you've done 6 books together, is that right?
Oh,
10.
10.
Oh, 10. Okay, yeah.
10, 11. How many have we? I don't know. Are we writing 10? Are we writing 11?
I just saw on your website
One of
under
those.
Tracie Peterson there were 6 books.
Need to be more.
So
Yeah,
that's
there's
why I
more.
thought that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
how did that
9
all get
is
started?
about to come out. Well, it's kind of funny because when my friend challenged me, she literally came out with the ream of papers of all the stuff that I'd written, and she whacked me over the head with it. And when she said, "You're going to do something with this or I'm going to kill you," she gave me a deadline, and I had no idea what I was doing. And this is 28 years ago, 29 years ago. And I wrote my favorite author, who was Tracie. And I wrote her an email. Well, I'd actually written her an email as a fan a couple years before, I think. And she'd actually emailed me, something sweet back. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll get a hold of her. But I always was thinking, well, she's not going to have time. And, she doesn't know who I am. So she's not going to help me. So then I'll have an excuse and can tell my friend, well, I tried, But Tracie was super sweet to me and reached out. And it was actually several years later that we were on the mission field in Alaska, and I had followed the advice that she had given me and I had submitted. And, I get this call back, and it's funny because how God just brought all of us together at the right time. And I have a daughter with a really rare nerve disorder. And a little bit later, she had a granddaughter, born with some health issues. And so we connected, and we just became friends. And then we became prayer partners, and they were praying for us in the mission field, and we were praying for them. And so years of all this went on. And then I'm published, finally, and I had been writing books, and we're on the phone, and she was my biggest cheerleader. I'm her biggest fan. She was, my biggest cheerleader. And we're on the phone talking one day because one of my proposals was with a publisher, and we were talking about, what was going on with this. And she goes, well, I've decided that we're going to write together. And so I always joke, because you remember those old commercials, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, whatever. So to me, it's like when Tracie Peterson says something, you pay attention.
Yeah.
Literally, I almost fell off my chair because at this point we'd known each other a long time and we were really good friends. And I would have never asked that of her. I would have never had the gumption, to ever. And so I was kind of shocked that she said it. We have to give credit to Tracie. It was her idea.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
Well, and you have to understand, co-writing was something that I had done several times before, and always after a lot of prayer and looking at a person's writing style, looking at their heart, what was it that caused them to write? Why did they, was this a ministry, or was this just for profit, or what, and Kim's attitude and heart were exactly the same as mine. It's a ministry. We want to share the gospel. We want to encourage people with biblical application. And we talked about that many times as she was writing her own stuff.
Mhm.
But as I just sat down and really prayed about it and felt like this was something that I was supposed to do. And so, we started looking at, like I told her, though, she loves to write romantic, suspense, contemporary stuff. And again, contemporary is not I write it, I have written it, but my heart is with historical. And so I told her, I said, well, it's going to have to be historical.
So what's your process like then working together? Do you like switch off writing chapters, or do you have one person doing the main writing, the other person pitching it? Like, how does it all work? It seems like it would be really hard to write a book with
I
somebody.
can tell you what Kim and I do, and Kim could even let you know what she and her daughter did, because they wrote together also. There's all sorts of ways that you can co-write. In my situation, the very first time I co-wrote was with Judith Pella, and she had just come out of her writing partnership with Michael Phillips. And so what she was used to doing was writing the first draft and then sending it off to Michael, or vice versa. But so I wrote the first draft, did the bulk of the research, and then sent it to her, and she fleshed it out, added her, things that she thought it needed, and corrected the things that she thought I had done wrong. And so that's how it worked for us. But first and foremost, with every situation of co-writing, we sit down and agree on a story outline. And our story synopsis is usually 30, 40 pages long. So in a sense, we're writing a mini version of the book. There's plotters and there's seat of the pants writers. And I've always been a plotter. I was taught from the get-go that you needed to have a good plot. And by putting together the synopsis then together, we both know where we want that story to go. We have a good idea of what kind of research we need. And in our case, Kim usually writes the first draft and then sends it to me. The book we're working on right now.
Brilliant.
The book we're working on right now, I'm writing the first draft, and she's going to add her brilliance and take care of it, because she's, got a lot on her plate right now.
Well, that makes sense, because I think you'd want like a consistent narrative voice throughout the book. So switching off chapters seems like that would be hard to make it consistent.
Well, that's another important issue with co-writing. You've got to read what they've already written and see if you think you can blend it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Kim and I definitely, when we started talking about it, Kim's just really adaptable. I was that way too. I could kind of look at the way somebody wrote and weave into it. And she's that way too. And not all writers can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually ask the writers if they're pantsers or plotters. But I would think writing a book together, you'd have to be a plotter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, Tracie, I call her the queen of synopses, because I write a long synopses, because I've learned that and it also saves your bacon, I don't know how many
times.
Yeah. But having the long synopsis is amazing. And it's the best thing you can do so that you don't waste time on rabbit trails and, going all over the place. That I say that she's the queen of synopses, because I hate writing synopses, but I do it because it's a discipline and I know that it's important. I need to do it. I think she's the only person to this day that has ever said that she actually likes writing the synopsis.
Well, and I've heard from other writers who say, that won't work for me. I don't want to plot because then I feel like I've already done the story and I'm bored with it then and I want to move on. But I don't marry the thing. And there's a lot of times the characters will take over. I know people laugh about that. How can a character that you're creating in your mind take over anything? But it's happened. And I've had characters just pop up with whole different directions. So, it's good to have that synopsis, but you don't have to, stick to it letter by letter necessarily. So once in a while we have to change something and we'll call up the editor and say, hey, this is going to change. And this is why. And we'll make sure that it works out into the story.
Yeah. And
Do
we
you
had
ever
a person beforehand, when we lived in the same area, it was a whole lot easier, but it was, we either come together like when we're at a conference, or we'll, go to the same place and come together, and it's just work, and we're focused in on it, or we're on the phone, or we're on email. And so all of our stuff goes back and forth, and we color code it, and we're always on the same page, I think, except for one time, we weren't on, for one little bitty thing, we weren't on the same page, but we just work really well together, and it goes back and forth. And then the long synopsis gets put together, and then it's really easy to put the book together, and it flows. Yeah. And people don't realize how much, even if I write the first draft and she is adding all of her brilliance, they don't realize how much, of Tracie is woven into the story, and people can never see, so the flow obviously works for our partnership because people can never tell, anything different. Whereas when I wrote with Kayla, I wrote all the adult POVs. She wrote all of the teen POVs because she was a teen at the time, and she wrote in first person and I wrote in third. So it was clear, there were two different voices. But for our books with me and Tracie, I think we really have a good flow going.
I think so too.
I was going to say, what happens if you disagree on kind of where the story's going? Like, how do you work that out?
We agreed when we started the partnership that one person would be the senior partner. In this case, it's Kim. Kim gets final say, and I yielded that to her because I just felt like she's going to do the first draft, and usually, and I just felt like that was important. And so when we were writing one of our stories, she had a minor character that was in the story, and I just didn't see any purpose for him. I didn't see, I didn't like him, didn't want him there, that kind of thing. Thought he was a waste of time, didn't think he moved the story forward, that kind of thing. She goes, no, we've got to have this. We need this, and so I yielded. I said, okay, that you have the final say. And turns out it was very good. She was right. We needed that. So.
Oh, good. That's good. It turned out, good.
Otherwise I would have been in big trouble.
Yeah. So the first books that you wrote together were about Alaska. Is that right?
The first one.
The first one. Yes.
Okay.
And later then we wrote two different Alaska series. And so those are probably the 6 books, that have been the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both love Alaska. She lived there. I've been there a couple dozen times. I've got good friends there.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a wonderful place to write about, and I'm sure we'll write about it again.
So Kimberly, you lived in Alaska?
I did, yes.
Where in Alaska?
Well, I lived in the Aleutian Chain, which is way out in, what you would consider the bush. And then we also lived on the mainland in Anchorage.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's we have another author that we've interviewed a bunch of times, Lizzie Shane, who also is writing from Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just a popular place for romance writers. Who knew?
Readers love it too.
Yeah, I guess so. Calling all fans of Outlander and time travel romance. New from Gabriel Meyer comes a dramatic time-crossing tale set in 3 separate timelines. Maggie inherited a gift from her parents that allows her to live in 1861, 1941, and 2001. Each night, she goes to sleep in one time period and wakes up in another. She faces a difficult journey to discover her true self while drawn to 3 worthy gentlemen before she must choose one life to keep and the rest to lose. Buy in this moment for 30% off and free shipping at bakerbookhouse.com. That's bakerbookhouse.com. Well, let's talk about The Heart's Choice. Tracie, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the book?
Well, Kim and I, again, we came together and we were trying to figure out what kind of series we'd like to do next, what kind of setting. And we were both living in Montana at the time. So we said, well, let's do Montana. And Kalispell came up. And Kalispell is a wonderful little town up in the Northwest. And so we decided it would be fun to set a series of books there. We did our own little research trip up there. We got, Kim had started exploring some ideas of different plots we could possibly use and whatnot. So The Heart's Choice is book 1 in this series. What is it? The Jewels of Kalispell, I believe, is the series title.
Yeah.
Is that right, Kim?
Have the book?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, it is The Jewels of
The
Kalispell.
Jewels of Kalispell. There will be 3 books in this series, and each of them stand alone with only a couple of zany characters that we dearly love threaded throughout the whole series.
Yes.
Yeah.
So each book has a special location, a historic site that's still there in Kalispell. And that's, one of the things that kind of sparked it for us. It's like, well, let's use a unique location. So the first book has the Carnegie Library, which is in Kalispell. It's now the Hockaday Museum of Art, but it still is the same building. And then we're using the train depot, the historic train depot, which is now the Chamber of Commerce. And we're also using the Macintosh Opera House, which nobody else gets to see right now because it's still there, but it had a fire. So it needs to be refurbished and everything, which would take millions of dollars. But it's very cool to see this opera house, that was there, and they let us in, which was a lot of fun. We contacted the owner of the building, but that's kind of a little bit of the backdrop, is to have these cool historic locations that are part of the setting in Kalispell.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because in a way it seems like it would be more work to write about a real place as opposed to just basing a place off of Kalispell, making your own town, because you've got to get all that research right.
It is. It's a lot harder. In fact, we had all these articles about one thing, and I think both of us are huge avid researchers, and I think both of us can fixate on things, and it's funny because I totally fixated on something working on this story, and I couldn't find the exact date, and I needed to know the exact date for, I don't remember, Tracie, which book is the Opera House? It's book 3, right?
3. Book 3.
I was like, I can't find the exact date because these books are very close together in time. And I wanted to know exactly when it was. And when we were in Kalispell doing research, I had picked up a book from the museum that was newspaper articles and ads. I mean, it's just this random, book that nobody else is going to pick it up, except for us. And I'm going through
crazy author.
I find an ad for, because none of the historic sites have any information about the date, but they have that this huge historic event happened with so many people and blah, 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 but there wasn't an exact date. And I found an ad for it in this book. And I was like, oh, look, there's the date.
Nice. Well, so Tracie, how did you decide on 1904 for the setting of this one?
That was totally Kim, and you'll have to ask her.
Oh,
It was the library. It was when the library was built.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, that was an interesting thing about the library, because you wouldn't expect Carnegie Library in this like tiny frontier town.
Yep.
Small. So that's an interesting thing.
But they actually financed a lot of tiny town libraries, and that was what was really amazing and wonderful about the Carnegie libraries. They would show up in these little tiny towns and everybody would just be blown away by it. But that was the heart of the whole process, was to get libraries in places that would otherwise have no hope of a library.
So how did you decide to make Rebecca a stenographer, the first female stenographer in Montana? How did that come up?
Well, I think we just had a lot of fun bouncing ideas back and forth, and we knew that we wanted her to witness something as a child and then for people to not believe her. And, so that's going to give huge motivation, to her character and what she pursues in life. And so law was a really, really big thing, but women lawyers were extremely rare. So a women stenographer was very, very rare. So we thought it would be fun to do that. And after we started researching all that, it's like, oh, this is perfect for her, because what she's going to hear, in the courtroom, this is going to be a huge catalyst for the story. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a fun dynamic to have kind of this mystery, this trial kind of going on at the same time as you have the romance, as you have the other details. Yeah. So this whole thing of don't marry the first man you meet, was that advice that was given to you, or that
when Kim went off to college? No.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of a fun through.
Well, you have to remember, early 1900s is really when women start doing things on their own and moving off and living alone or living with other women or whatever in groups. And so I think Kim and I both just agreed this was the advice we would give our children. Tell our daughters, don't marry the first man you meet.
Yeah.
Because in that day and age too, I mean, seriously, they used to joke when I was a little girl that you went to college to get your MRS, not your bachelor's degree or anything else, but you were going to find a husband. And the attitude was no doubt even stronger back in the early turn of the 1900s, for women to marry and settle down, have a family rather than work a job. Oh my gosh, how scandalous.
Yeah. Well, how did you come up with Mark as a character? I mean, it's such a like scandalous thing for him working in a library. How did you come up with that?
Well, it wasn't scandalous. Like we put a note. Well, I think we did, maybe.
In his family, it was.
Oh, in his family. Very much so. Very much so. But it's funny how nowadays, when you think of librarian, we always think of the woman with the bun and the glasses on the end of her nose, and the stereotype of that. But that was, later that women really became more librarians. And so it was very prominent for the men to do it back then. But historically in Kalispell, which is funny, they actually had women, who had been the librarians. We just thought it would be a fun twist because having a man raised on a ranch, you typically think of these men as cowboys. And I don't know how many readers, we've had talk to us at reader events and book signings and stuff. And it's like, can you please, not write any stories about, the Westerns with the cowboys and they're always riding a horse and, all of this. And so, there's readers who are looking for a hero that might do something a little different. And we just had fun with that. Since it was going to be the Carnegie Library, we thought, okay, we're going to make him the director of the library and have his family own a ranch. And so this is going to make, big conflict.
Yeah. That it was fun.
And actually the characters too, I think sometimes the reader their imagination is really pulled in different directions than when you do the unexpected. And so instead of making him the one who wants this ranch, his sister's the one who wants the ranch. She's the one who has a passion and a love for everything on the ranch. And he has a passion for the intellectual and the books. And it just made for a nice twist, like Kim said, something different.
Mm-hmm. So you have quite a bit of the villain in this book. I won't spoil it for people listening, but you even have him narrating a couple sections. Was that hard to write from his perspective?
Kim is fantastic at villains. She has the best evil people that make you just cringe.
So our editor, Karen Ball, I've worked with her for many years. She was my first editor on my fiction books as well. She's amazing. She was Francine Rivers, editor, the first one in the Christian Market, and Karen Kingsbury. I mean, she knows her stuff. She knows story so well. And she
She's
always
amazing.
cracks me up because she'll tell me, she goes, Kim, you have no edits on your villains. And that makes me laugh because I always want to say I'm a pastor's kid and a pastor's wife. What does that say about me? That I like to write these villains and these bad guys. So I always tell people when they ask about our strengths in writing, Tracie's really got a good strength in the romance area and in that thread. My strength is killing people and the villains. So
Yeah.
She is great at it.
Was it hard creating basically a whole town of characters like Marvella and the judge and some of those other like Mark's dad and sister? There was just quite a few. You had to kind of create a whole town.
Sometimes it can be, but for Kim and I, usually it isn't. I think the thing is we have known so many people in our life, and we just kind of thread in characters that are similar to people we know, or maybe a combination of characters. Like Marvella and the judge have got to be one of my all-time favorites of any of the characters we've written. And the reason is I've known these people. I mean, they're kind of a blend of people that I grew up in church with. And I think Kim feels the same way because, they were the older, older people of the church, and they were stayed in their ways. They knew things about stuff, and they were just great characters to look up to, but also to just kind of get amused by because of their zaniness to the mind of a 12-year-old girl or to a young woman or whatever. Sometimes they seemed really wacky. But so like with Marvella and Milton, they are, the judge, they are just delightful to me because they really do bring back to mind people that I knew as a kid. But what was that?
I just said, I think we just had so much fun.
Yes.
Writing them. And it's always a joy when you have those characters that are just fun and they make you laugh, or you think, oh, what if they do this?
Yes.
And since you're writing 3 books in this town, do you, as you're writing, kind of be like, oh, that's one that that's one that stands out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as I said earlier, there will be a thread of Marvella and the judge throughout the series because they are just too much fun. There is just too much potential for them. And the neat thing was, by making him a judge and part of the city fathers, so to speak, or whatever, he's got his hands in all the little pots that have to do with the politics and with the town running and all that. Marvella's, she's involved heavily with the women's club and the church and all the different things that she participates in. So she's got inside knowledge on those things. They make the perfect people to continue through the series.
Yeah, interesting.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
So there's a lot of faith in this book. Is that hard to know kind of how much to include it, how to include it, how to write that part of it? What do you think, Kimberly?
Well, we both, we're also avid Bible study partners. So
Oh, okay.
a lot of our books, if not all of them, they're normally like in the book, it's normally what we are studying, maybe some
Yes.
stuff that we are learning, ourselves along the way. And some things that really pop out and jump out to us that really relate to the characters. And the thing that we want the most is for it to all be relatable to people, because readers, as they're reading, they want to be able to experience it, like they put on the skin of the character. And it's really great. We had a friend of ours from a Bible study we were in together that when she read All Things Hidden, I remember she called and she goes, how did you know exactly what I needed to hear, as I'm reading
Aw.
this book and something I was struggling with? She goes, because I haven't told the soul, and so I think that's a huge part of our faith, and that's part of who we are, is allowing the Holy Spirit to to just write through us. And it's like, okay, Lord, we want to be willing vessels. You just show us what we need to use in this story. Because I always say that it's not our stories, it's his. All of them are his stories. And
Absolutely.
so he's the one who gave us the gift and the creativity and all of our quirkiness. I'm quirky, but
And the thing is, we get a lot of emails and letters from people writing to us to talk about how much the faith-based aspects of the story have touched their lives, maybe even changed their lives. And we've both had people write and say, you gave me a new lease on life. You've brought me back to the word. You've brought me back to church. You've brought me back to my family. Things like that are just so powerful and dynamic, mind-blowing, that something as simple as a fiction story could help a person to identify and see themselves in it and see hope for ways that they can alter or change the bad things that are going on in their life. I had one little gal who picked up a copy of one of my books in a church mission place where she was staying the night because she was homeless. And she had kind of run away. I mean, she was a young adult, but she had a drug issue and her family had kind of just had enough. And she picked up one of my books and was reading through it. And she told me it gave her the courage to go home and get clean. And that she was writing to let me know that she was now clean and back with her family, and that the book had played that kind of a role. So for us, we know that this is a ministry. This is something we both feel very strongly about. And so we try to weave that in such a way that it's a natural thing rather than I'm going to give you a sermon now and I'm going to tell you why you need God. And so we tried to come up with characters who have those kind of same internal struggles that you or me could have, anybody, the things that cause problems and conflicts in life. For me, one of the biggest themes is forgiveness. I've had to be forgiven much, and I've had to forgive much, and it's huge to me. And I stand here at this age and this side of the fence saying it's critical that you forgive and forgive quickly. And forgiveness isn't acceptance. It's not approval of what's been done. It's giving up your right to retribution to God and letting go. And that's so liberating. And I have had so many people tell me from reading that theme in my books that it has given them new liberty too. So that's why I do what I do. And I think Kim would say that's why she does what she does.
Yeah.
Do you find it challenging at all as clean romance writers to build the romantic tension without any of the steamier sides of romantic fiction? Find that hard at all?
I don't, because there's so much more. The world will tell you that the physical is all there is, but there is so much of romance that has to do with friendship, with the mental, emotional aspects of a relationship, of really knowing a person. And when you look at the Bible overall, I mean, it's the best love story we've got. And it's all about knowing God better, getting in there and having a relationship with him. And so I think of those things as I write relationships in the stories and try to show the kind of problems even that sometimes when the physical comes to the forefront and creates the focus, you get away and lose these other aspects. and that sometimes you really need to be aware of that so that you can learn how to deal with and balance with your, with the physical, because that's what you see pushed constantly. And, it's sad to me that that physical aspect is now just, pretty much recreation among our young people, whereas there's so much more to intimacy. And it's so important that, to me, that the books don't titillate, but they just give you that satisfactory relationship build and overall arc throughout the story.
Do you agree, Kimberly?
I do agree. And I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think so much of the romantic tension, especially when it's, the sexual romantic tension that's in movies and books and everything, it's all fluff. And
Yeah.
I know people need fluff to escape, right? But most readers I have found really want more than that, so that, they're devouring books, they're devouring movies, because they're searching, they're looking. And so I'm not a fluffy writer. And, I tell people I don't want to have a fluffy bunny relationship. I don't have time for fluffy bunny relationships. It's just, I want real, I want gritty, I want, the depth of emotion and sorrow and, what we really have to deal with in the world. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But I really love how we're able to work together. And again, I feel like Tracie has a better strength in the writing of the romance part.
I'm just an old romantic at heart.
So what would each of yours pitch be to somebody to try out this book? They're going to like it. What would you say, Tracie? Why don't you do yours first?
Boy, you got me on the spot there. I'm not good with short and little. I'm good with long and involved.
Oh yeah, the synopsis you said.
Right. Remember those 40-page synopses. I guess I would tell my readers, if you're looking for a good mystery, adventure, romantic story set in Western Montana during the early 1900s, this is the story for you. Kim's much better at the short. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say? What would be your pitch, Kim?
I would just talk about having, the hero is the new librarian at the Carnegie Library, and the heroine is the first female court stenographer in all of Montana. And they have to figure something out before it's too late, because a man's life is on the line. And so they work together, for that. And, it's really cool how they come forward. And when I've been telling people about this story, and I was like, and just wait until you meet Marvella. I want to hear about when you meet Marvella, when they read Marvella on the page.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have some fun get to know you questions that we like to end our interview with. And
no math.
No math. No math. And I'll ask the question, and then if Kimberly you want to answer first, then Tracie, that would be great. Good. Okay, so the first question is, what's the best ice cream flavor?
Oh. Mint chocolate chip and chocolate peanut butter. Depends on what mood I'm in.
Those are good picks.
Tillamook makes a incredible ice cream called Utterly Chocolate. That is my favorite.
That sounds good too. All right, what's your favorite color?
Red.
Oh, that's good. All right, what music are you into?
I love contemporary Christian music, and I love We the Kingdom, and I love Lauren Daigle, and I mean, there's so many, but I listen to a lot of worship music. But like while I'm writing, I listen to a lot of classical music, and that's my training. Was my life growing up was classical music. So it's funny, I'll be listening to something and I'll be playing the piano piece with my toes, under the desk as I'm typing.
Yeah, that's the thing a lot of people don't realize about Kimberly. She is a classically trained musician with a voice like Sandy Patty, who was Juilliard wanted her and she told them no. She's just an amazing musician. And
Sweet.
I can't say enough about her. I mean, she's just it just blows my mind. But I like everything. People think I'm really weird because here I am in my 60s now, and I even like some of the rap music. So I like everything. I love classical. I did some training. I took piano for years, and my teacher loved me because all I ever wanted to play was classical. And so, but I love some of the new modern music. Obviously, I mean, I'm a girl of the 70s, so I still listen to 70s on the radio sometimes, but I like a little bit of everything. And I love the modern, the contemporary Christian music, like Kim mentioned. I love that praise and worship music that we have now. And, I was a huge fan of Rich Mullins, and, just such a wide variety. I even like some of the, like the 40s and the crooners and all that. So there's a little bit of everything in my repertoire.
Nice. All right. What is your go-to date night food?
We're very excited because we're about to move and we're moving back to a place that has it. And I know Tracie can guess what it is, but the restaurant is Chewy's.
Chewy's. Tell what
kind of food is
though?
it?
Yeah.
It's Tex-Mex, and they make their
Oh.
own homemade tortillas and chips and everything. And it's my husband and I both love it.
And my husband and I too. I mean, we love Mexican food. So that's a good date night food for us.
Okay. What is your go-to date night activity for going out and doing something?
Dinner and a movie. Or if it's during the day, we'll play golf and then have dinner.
Okay.
And Jim and I, when we get some time to ourselves, we like a long drive out, just to drive around and look at things, go out into the country, explore our area, that kind of thing. And just to talk, because so often we don't get a chance to talk. It seems the phone's always ringing, or somebody's always needing something, or there are multiple interruptions. But the car, usually, we can get a nice conversation in and just be together.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's cute. Okay. Which do you like better, dogs or cats?
Dogs.
I don't know that I can choose. I adore both. We have both.
Okay. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
Mountains.
Oh, there we go. Okay. What's your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Christmas.
I'm a huge fan of Christmas. I am thoroughly, but I really love celebrating 4th of July. I am such a super patriot. And for reasons of my upbringing, it is one of the holidays that brings me closest to God even. I love that the liberty and freedom we have in Christ comes up as a reminder during the liberty and freedom we have as Americans. And so 4th of July is just huge to me.
Cool. Okay. Last question. What is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
While you were sleeping.
No, it's a perfect movie. I wouldn't change a thing. Good choice.
That's a toughie. I did like While You Were Sleeping. You've Got Mail.
Yeah, one of my faves.
That was a favorite of mine too. So
I also love Jane Eyre.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Old ones are great. I mean, yeah. It's hard.
All right.
It's hard not to love it if it's romantic and fun, lighthearted, and not cussing and
Right.
Yeah. Well, very good. You answered all the questions. Thank you so much for coming to talk with us. We'll have all the information for the book in the description. People can pick it up this week. The week this airs. People pick it up this week. But do you have, are you on social media? Do you have anything like that you want to share?
All of my social medias are on my website. So if you go to kimberleywoodhouse.com, it has all of the little icons at the top. You can find it. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all of the Goodreads, BookBub, all the fun stuff.
Okay, great.
Right. Pretty much the same for me too. TraciePeterson.com on my website and Facebook.com is author Tracie Peterson or Tracie Peterson author. So you can get a hold of me there.
Great. We'll have all that in the description. So thanks again to both of you. It was so great to meet you.
You are great. We
Awesome.
appreciate
I'd
it.
like to thank Tracie and Kimberly for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun to get to talk with them. And make sure you check out the book. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out and make sure you're following the podcast on Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group and merch store, which is really fun. And thanks again, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.